The scent of honeysuckle and freshly mown grass always filled the air in Oak Ridge, especially on a perfect late summer evening like this one. It was a smell I'd learned to associate with peace, with safety, with a life meticulously cultivated over 15 long years. My little slice of suburbia, with its pristine white picket fence, its carefully tended rose garden, and the laughter of my grandchildren echoing from the living room, it was everything I'd ever wanted, everything I'd fought tooth and nail to build and protect. My name is Evelyn Reed, and to anyone who saw me, I was just a sweet, unassuming grandmother, a pillar of the community, known for my homemade apple pies and my quiet demeanor. But even then, even amidst this perfect tableau, a tiny, insidious tremor of unease would sometimes snake its through me, a cold reminder that perfect facades are often the most fragile. Tonight, the tremor was barely a whisper. My daughter, Emily, her bright, open face alight with the joy of motherhood, was recounting Lily's latest school triumph. Lily, my 10-year-old granddaughter, a whirlwind of boundless energy and curiosity, was sketching furiously at the dining table, oblivious to the grown-up conversation. Her younger brother, Noah, 7 and perpetually sticky, was attempting to construct a fort out of sofa cushions, giggling with his father, Mark, Emily's kind and dependable husband. The air was thick with comfort, with the reassuring clatter of plates and silverware, and the soft murmur of happy voices. "Mom," Emily began, her eyes twinkling as she gestured to my near-empty wine glass, "we're almost out of the Chardonnay. The good one, you know? The one you love. Would you mind terribly if I just ran to the Oak Ridge Market for another bottle? It's just around the corner." My heart, which usually beat with a steady, grandmotherly rhythm, gave a soft, almost imperceptible lurch. For a fleeting second, an irrational voice in my head screamed no. A phantom chill traced its way down my spine. But then I dismissed it, chiding myself for the absurd paranoia that occasionally pricked through my carefully constructed calm. Emily had been working hard all day, and besides, I was enjoying the moment too much to break the spell. "Of course not, darling," I replied, my voice as calm and steady as I'd trained it to be over the years. "I'll go. You stay with the kids. I could use a little stretch after all that delicious food." I stood up, the familiar ache in my knees a welcome, grounding sensation. I grabbed my purse, exchanged a loving glance with Emily, and then, with a deep breath, stepped out into the twilight. The air was still warm, but a subtle coolness hinted at the approaching night. The crickets were starting their evening chorus, a gentle serenade to the suburban dream. The Oak Ridge Market was just as I left it a few days ago, bright, orderly, filled with the mundane symphony of beeping scanners and rustling shopping carts. Emily went to the wine aisle, while I waited by the self-checkout, casually observing the scene. A young woman, no older than 20, was manning one of the registers. Her name tag read Sarah. She had wide, nervous eyes and kept glancing over her shoulder, a habit I immediately noticed and mentally flagged. It wasn't the kind of nervous fidgeting common to new employees, it was something sharper, more primal. Emily returned quickly, a bottle of our favorite Chardonnay in her hand. She headed towards Sarah's register. I watched as Sarah scanned the bottle, her fingers trembling slightly. Emily paid, smiled, and then turned to leave. Just as she took her first step away, Sarah leaned forward, her eyes wide with unmasked terror, and reached out. Her fingers clamped onto my wrist, not Emily's, but mine, with a surprising strength for someone so seemingly fragile. Her grip was cold, almost desperate. My blood ran cold. My entire being snapped into a state of hyper-awareness I hadn't needed in years. Every nerve ending screamed, every muscle tensed. I felt the familiar, dangerous surge of adrenaline, a rush I thought I'd long since buried. "They know," Sarah whispered, her voice barely a breath, rough with fear, her eyes darting wildly, "about you. And they're already here. Be careful." The words hit me like a physical blow. They know. About you. The carefully constructed walls around my past, the impenetrable fortress of Evelyn Reed, crumbled in an instant. The serene hum of the supermarket vanished, replaced by a deafening roar in my ears. 15 years. 15 years of hiding, of being invisible, of living a life that was nothing but a meticulously crafted lie. And now, in a whispered breath from a frightened girl, it was all unraveling. My mind raced, a torrent of chaotic thoughts. Who are they? How did she know? How did they find me, after all this time? The images of a different life, a life of shadows, codes, and whispered aliases, flashed before my eyes. A life I had desperately tried to forget, to bury beneath layers of gardening clubs and PTA meetings. A life where I was not Evelyn Reed, but someone far more dangerous, far more hunted. The last conversation, 15 years ago, before I disappeared, a promise to a dying man, a vow to protect secrets, to vanish without a trace. They will never stop looking, he'd warned. I had scoffed then, foolishly believing that time and distance would be enough. Now, that scoff felt like a death knell. My quiet suburban dream, the safe haven I'd built for Emily and her children, was compromised. And the cold dread that settled deep in my bones told me this was only the beginning. The mask, the one I had worn for so long it had become a second skin, almost slipped. But not quite. Not yet. I had to maintain the illusion. For them. For Emily. I managed a faint, wobbly smile, my heart pounding a frantic drum against my ribs. "Thank you, dear," I said, my voice unervingly calm, a testament to years of practiced deception. "For the warning. I appreciate it." I gently, but firmly, disengaged my wrist from her grasp. Her eyes, still wide with fear, conveyed a desperate plea for understanding. I gave her a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. I understood. And I knew exactly what I had to do. I had to play along. But not for long. My polite smile, a masterpiece of practiced composure, held firm even as the world around me began to tilt on its axis. "Thank you, dear," I repeated to Sarah, my voice a soft murmur that belied the earthquake erupting within me. My hand, which she had just released, felt strangely numb, yet every nerve ending was electrified. I could feel the cold prickle of adrenaline, sharp and clear, cutting through the mundane supermarket air. My mind, usually a quiet garden of domestic thoughts, was now a lightning-fast calculation engine, sifting through threats, possibilities, and potential exits. I needed to act, and fast. But I couldn't betray the shock that was tearing at my insides. Not in front of Emily. Not in front of Sarah, who was now nervously eyeing the checkout line, her fear a palpable thing. I turned to my daughter, forcing another placid smile. "Oh, Emily, darling," I began, pitching my voice to sound just a touch apologetic, "I completely forgot to grab those organic blueberries Noah loves. You know, for his morning pancakes. Would you mind terribly taking the wine and heading to the car? I'll just be a moment, I promise." Emily, ever obliging, took the bottle. "Sure, Mom. Don't be too long, Mark's probably wondering where we are." She gave me a quick hug, completely unaware of the maelstrom beneath my calm exterior. Her innocent embrace felt like a cruel joke, a stark reminder of everything I stood to lose. As she walked away, I caught Sarah's eye one last time. Her gaze was a silent scream, a desperate plea. I gave her another, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement that I'd heard her, that I was listening, and that I understood the urgency. My plan was already forming, swift and instinctive. No questions now. No drawing attention to myself. Just observation. I walked calmly towards the produce section, but instead of turning towards the berries, I veered right, heading purposefully towards the rear exit marked employees only. It was a calculated risk, but a necessary one. If they were here, they wouldn't expect me to vanish. They'd expect me to panic, to question, to run out the front door. I pushed open the heavy steel door, stepping into the cool, damp night air behind the supermarket. The alley reeked of stale garbage and cleaning supplies, a stark contrast to the honeysuckle of my garden. My eyes, years ago trained to see in the dark, quickly adjusted. I moved silently, my posture still that of a slightly stooped elderly woman, but every muscle coiled, every sense alert. I pressed myself against the grimy brick wall, blending into the deeper shadows behind a stack of overflowing dumpsters. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. 15 minutes, I thought, remembering the casual timeline I'd given myself. 15 minutes to see if the threat is real, or if this is just a cruel trick of an overactive imagination. But deep down, I already knew. Sarah's terror was too genuine, too unvarnished. I watched the main parking lot from my vantage point, a ghost in the shadows. The stream of cars was thinning. A few late shoppers emerged, their faces illuminated by their phone screens. Emily's car was already gone. Good. She was safe. For now. And then I saw it. A sleek, black suburban SUV, its windows tinted heavily, moved slowly, deliberately, down the far end of the parking lot. No license plates. My breath hitched. It wasn't just cruising, it was scanning. Its pace was unnaturally slow, a predatory glide. My eyes narrowed, focusing on the dark silhouettes within. Two of them. One in the driver's seat, one in the passenger's. Their heads swiveled, methodically sweeping the parking area. My instincts, honed in a life I'd tried to forget, screamed. They weren't looking for a lost child or a stolen cart. They were hunting. And the way their gaze lingered on the entrance of the supermarket, on the very spot where Sarah had whispered her warning, told me they weren't just here. They were here for me. The SUV paused for a moment, just across from the main entrance, before moving on, eventually disappearing around the corner, as if satisfied with its initial sweep. But I knew better. They hadn't left. They were merely widening their search, or perhaps establishing a perimeter. A cold certainty settled over me, heavier than any fear. This wasn't some random mugging, some suburban crime. This was them. The people I'd outrun, the organization I'd defied. The shadows that had haunted my periphery for years, always just out of reach, had finally found their way back into the light. 15 years ago, I had vanished into the Witness Protection Program, leaving behind a life of espionage and covert operations, promising myself I would never look back. I had changed my name, severed all ties, and rebuilt myself piece by agonizing piece. They had declared me dead, a ghost in their files. But evidently, some ghosts refused to stay buried. The promise, the one I'd made to the dying man 15 years ago, echoed in my mind: protect the data. Destroy them if you have to. And then, disappear. Live. I had done the latter, faithfully. But the former, the destroy them part. I'd hoped it would never come to that. The chill in the air intensified, not from the temperature, but from the sudden, stark realization. The past wasn't just knocking, it was kicking down my carefully constructed door. And my quiet, unassuming life as Evelyn Reed? It had been nothing more than a temporary, utterly convincing masquerade. The game, it seemed, was back on. And this time, the stakes were far, far higher. My family. My beautiful, innocent Emily, Lily, and Noah. They were now in the crosshairs, unknowingly caught in a war that wasn't theirs. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the scent of garbage suddenly grounding. My hand instinctively went to my purse, not for comfort, but for the weight of it, the solid object that could be swung, thrown, used. Old habits die hard. And some, it seemed, never truly died at all. The drive home was a blur of heightened senses. Every car that passed me, every shadow that danced in my rearview mirror, sent a jolt of alarm through me. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, reminding myself to breathe, to appear normal. The mask had to stay on, even when every fiber of my being screamed to shed it and prepare for battle. Pulling into my driveway, the familiar comfort of my home felt alien, tainted. The charming porch light seemed to reveal too much, the open curtains too inviting. I carefully locked the car door, lingering for a moment, listening. Only the chirping crickets and the distant murmur of the neighborhood. A normal suburban night. An utterly deceptive one. Emily met me at the door, her brow furrowed. "Mom, you look awfully pale. Are you feeling all right? You were gone a little longer than I expected." My heart gave another painful throb. She noticed. She always noticed. Her genuine concern was a dagger to my carefully constructed composure. "Oh, darling, just a slight headache," I lied, forcing a tired smile. "Must be the change in the weather. And those blueberries were a bit elusive, had to search for them." I held up the small plastic container, a prop in my carefully orchestrated performance. "Emily, bless her innocent heart, bought it. Well, you should get some rest. We can finish cleaning up." She ushered me inside, her arm around my shoulders, a gesture of comfort that felt like a burden of guilt. I couldn't tell her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I spent the rest of the evening in a fog, going through the motions of grandmotherly contentment. I helped Noah with his fort, listened to Lily read a chapter from her book, exchanged pleasantries with Mark. My mind, however, was a frantic battlefield. Every glance at my grandchildren filled me with a primal, ferocious resolve. They will not touch them. That night, sleep was an impossible luxury. The moment the house grew quiet, the soft sounds of my family sleeping filling the air, I slipped out of bed. My bare feet glided silently across the polished hardwood floors, a trained stealth that had not dulled with age. I went to my study, a room filled with books and knitting projects, another layer of the Evelyn Reed persona. Behind a heavy, antique bookshelf, built into the wall with painstaking precision, was a hidden compartment. My fingers, surprisingly steady, traced the almost invisible seam. With a faint click, it opened, revealing a small, velvet-lined space. Inside, carefully preserved, lay the ghosts of my former life. I pulled out a worn, leather-bound photo album. The first picture was of a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s. Her face was sharper, her eyes colder, more focused, less softened by years of baking cookies and tending roses. Her posture was straight, almost rigid. That was me. Or rather, her. The woman I used to be. The woman codenamed Swan. I barely recognized her, yet a flicker of her steely resolve still resided deep within me. Beneath the photo, nestled amongst faded newspaper clippings, were a series of articles detailing a string of mysterious disappearances, all individuals connected to a nascent tech firm, a firm I had once helped infiltrate. The dates on the clippings were 15 years old, exactly. The articles mentioned a corporate espionage scandal, unexplained financial irregularities, and then, a chilling silence. The story simply vanished from the headlines, swallowed by something far more powerful. And then, the final item, a weathered, slightly crumpled, but pristine fake passport. The photo was of me, but the name on it was Evelyn Reed. My birth name was different, long forgotten by anyone who mattered. This passport was my ticket to oblivion, my permit to reinvent myself. It had been my only companion when I first arrived in Oak Ridge, a ghost with a new identity. My mind, now fully awakened, replayed fragmented memories. The project, a dangerous deep-cover operation. The disappearance of my team members, one by one. And the last desperate plea from my mentor, David Thorne, as he lay dying, whispering about a shadow corporation and the invaluable data we had managed to steal. He'd told me to destroy the data, to expose them, but if I couldn't, to simply disappear. And so, I had. A name surfaced from the depths of my memory, a whisper of dread, Corvus. It wasn't just a bird, it was a symbol, a call sign, a dark shadow that had plagued our operation. Was Corvus the alias of an individual, or the name of the organization that had hunted us? I'd always assumed it was a unit, a specialized division of the Shadow Corporation, relentless and unforgiving. Now, the name felt like a brand, burned onto my very soul. I sat there, the tangible evidence of my past spread before me, the comfortable silence of the house a stark contrast to the storm raging within. The idyllic life of Evelyn Reed was a beautifully crafted illusion. Now, the strings were being pulled, the curtain was being raised. They were here. But why now? And how had they found me after all this time? Was it a random accident, or had something I'd done, some small, innocent action, triggered their dormant hunt? A cold dread wrapped around my heart. I had to protect my family. But how do you fight ghosts from a past you've spent 15 years burying? How do you become Swan again without destroying Evelyn Reed? The moral tightrope stretched before me, thin and treacherous. The peaceful dream was over. The nightmare had just begun. The next morning, the sun rose with an almost cruel brightness, mockingly illuminating the veneer of normalcy I was desperate to maintain. I made pancakes for Lily and Noah, brewed coffee for Emily and Mark, and pretended to fuss over a wilting rose in my garden. Every casual glance I received, every innocent question, felt like an interrogation. The only comfort was the sheer ignorance of my family. Their happiness was a shield, but also a terrible vulnerability. After everyone had left for their day, Emily to her graphic design studio, Mark to his engineering firm, the children to school, the silence in the house was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, expectant, filled with the echoes of Sarah's whispered warning. I knew I couldn't just wait. I had to go back to the source. I had to find out more about Sarah. I dressed in my usual comfortable clothes, a practical cardigan, sensible slacks, my most unassuming walking shoes. I even grabbed my reusable shopping bag, a prop for the role of the everyday suburban grandmother. But beneath the surface, my senses were sharpened, my mind alert, scanning for anything out of place. Every parked car, every loitering pedestrian, was meticulously assessed. The Oak Ridge market felt different this morning. The mundane hum now carried a subtle undertone of dread. I walked in, feigning a need for cat food. We didn't even own a cat. My eyes immediately found Sarah behind her register. She looked even more tired, more withdrawn than yesterday. Her movements were jerky, her eyes constantly darting towards the entrance and the security cameras. She was clearly terrified, a rabbit caught in headlights. I made my way through the aisles, pretending to compare brands of cat food, all the while watching her. My mind replayed the exact sequence of events from last night, searching for any detail I might have missed. Her grip on my wrist. The urgency in her voice. The way she had looked at me, not just generally distressed, but specifically directed. I approached her register, placing the cat food on the conveyor belt. "Good morning, dear," I said, my voice carefully modulated to sound friendly and unthreatening. "Quite a busy morning, isn't it?" Sarah flinched, her head snapping up. Her eyes, shadowed by lack of sleep, met mine, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of recognition, a desperate hope. But then it was quickly replaced by a veil of practiced indifference. "Morning, ma'am," she mumbled, her gaze fixed on the scanner, avoiding direct eye contact. "I seem to have misplaced my wallet," I said, a little too loudly, catching the attention of the customer behind me. Such a silly old woman I am. Left it in the car, I suppose. I'll just pop out and get it. This was my opening. I leaned in closer, dropping my voice, making it sound conspiratorial, concerned. "You know," I began, my gaze sweeping casually around the store, "I had the strangest feeling last night. Driving home, I thought I saw a very distinctive black SUV, the one without license plates, hanging around the market. Did you happen to notice anything unusual? Any unfamiliar faces?" Sarah's face, already pale, drained of what little color it had. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She shook her head, almost imperceptibly. "No, ma'am. Nothing unusual. Just the usual rush." Her voice was tight, strained, betraying her obvious fear. She was denying it, but her body language screamed confirmation. "Are you sure, dear?" I pressed, my voice softening, infused with a subtle layer of understanding. "Because those men, they seemed rather intimidating." I paused, letting the words hang in the air, testing her reaction. She shuddered. Her eyes darted around, then briefly met mine, a silent plea for discretion. She wanted to talk, but she couldn't. Not here. Not now. Then, as she tried to compose herself, her hand went to her work apron, nervously adjusting the name tag pinned to it. And that's when I saw it. A tiny, almost invisible tattoo on the inside of her wrist, peeking out from beneath her sleeve as she adjusted her apron. It was a stylized raven, its wings spread, intricate and dark. My breath caught in my throat. Corvus. The name, the symbol, hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was too specific, too intimately tied to my buried past. It wasn't just a random tattoo. It was a brand. A symbol of the organization I had fled, or perhaps, a desperate mark of connection to it. Sarah wasn't just a frightened cashier who had accidentally stumbled upon some information. She was connected. Either a willing participant, or, more likely, a desperate victim. The latter seemed more plausible, given her obvious terror. The implications flooded my mind. If Sarah was marked, or connected, then they hadn't just found me. They had found her. And through her, they had found the trail to me. Had she been an unwitting pawn, or a deliberate plant? No, her fear was too real. She was likely another casualty, another person caught in the web of Corvus. Well, if you do happen to remember anything, dear, I said, my voice resuming its sweet, grandmotherly tone, don't hesitate to mention it. Sometimes, just talking about things helps. I gave her a warm, reassuring smile, the kind that invited trust. My hand dipped into my shopping bag, retrieving a small, neatly folded piece of paper. It was a blank receipt, on which I had quickly scribbled my phone number and a single, carefully chosen phrase, "If you need anything." From someone who understands. I placed the note discreetly under a pack of gum on the counter, making sure it was hidden from casual view but easily discoverable by Sarah. "I'll just grab my wallet," I said, giving her one last, knowing look. "You have a good day now." As I walked out, I didn't look back. But I felt Sarah's gaze on my back, a mixture of fear and, I hoped, a tiny spark of something else, hope. The first thread of this tangled web had been pulled. And it was far more dangerous, and far more personal, than I had initially dared to imagine. Corvus was not just a memory, it was a living, breathing entity, its dark wings once again casting a shadow over my meticulously constructed life. And now, they had Sarah. And through Sarah, they had me. The drive home was spent in a calculated fury. Corvus. The name, the image of that stylized raven tattoo on Sarah's wrist, churned in my mind. It was a scar, a brand, a symbol of everything I had run from. I pulled into my driveway, the engine still running, and made a quick decision. The house was no longer a sanctuary, it was a potential target. I drove around the block once, twice, meticulously scanning for any anomaly, a parked car that seemed too out of place, a flicker of light in an unlit window. Nothing immediately obvious. They were good. They were always good. Inside, I bypassed the kitchen and went straight to my study. I retrieved the old, clunky laptop from its hidden compartment, a relic from my former life, carefully wiped and reloaded with a clean OS, but still containing the encrypted partitions I'd built myself. I hadn't touched it in years, but my fingers remembered the muscle memory, the precise sequence of keystrokes. The internet, a tool I usually used for gardening forums and recipe searches, transformed under my touch into a vast, intricate web of information. I started with Corvus. The search results were a dizzying mix of ornithology, ancient mythology, and then, a familiar pattern began to emerge. Scattered, fragmented news articles from 15 years ago. Whispers of a shadowy hacking group. Connections to political scandals. Data leaks. The names of defunct shell corporations. It was all there, buried deep in the digital archives, almost impossible to connect without knowing what you were looking for. I sifted through the noise, using old search parameters, cross-referencing names and dates. I found vague references to a Project Chimera, an early, less polished alias for what would later become Project Phoenix, the data I had stolen. The articles mentioned insider threats and untraceable digital attacks. But nothing substantial, nothing that truly exposed the vast, insidious reach of the Shadow Corporation, the true puppet masters. They had always been adept at erasing their tracks, at making themselves invisible. My mind raced back to the old days. Corvus had been our team's internal code name. We were the ravens, flying in the dark, exposing secrets. But then Corvus had become something else. A hunter. A betrayer. Our own symbol turned against us. As the clock on my laptop screen ticked past midnight, a faint, almost imperceptible buzz vibrated on the desk. My old burner phone. It rarely rang, usually only for automated spam calls. But tonight, it wasn't spam. The caller ID was blocked. I picked it up, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. Hello? My voice was calm, steady, betraying none of the apprehension coursing through me. Evelyn? The voice was a whisper, trembling, barely audible. Sarah. It's Sarah. From the market. I know, dear, I replied, my voice gentle, reassuring. Are you all right? No, she choked out, a sob catching in her throat. I can't talk here. They might be listening. They told me, they warned me. Her voice was laced with terror. Of course, I said, my mind already calculating. Where can we meet? Somewhere private. Somewhere safe. The Morning Brew coffee shop, she stammered, naming a small, independent cafe on the edge of town. Before it opens. 6:30 a.m. Can you meet me? I'll be there, I promised, my voice firm, instilling a confidence I barely felt. Don't worry, Sarah. We'll figure this out. She hung up abruptly, leaving me with the dial tone and the heavy silence of my study. I closed the laptop, my fingers hovering over the cool metal. Project Phoenix. That was the real name. The data, the powerful algorithm, the truth that could expose the Shadow Corporation, now I knew its true name, Orion. It was a constellation, a hunter. How fitting. The original Project Phoenix was more than just stolen files, it was a devastating piece of software, a digital weapon we had designed to expose the darkest secrets of Orion, to crumble their infrastructure, to bring down the powerful, corrupt figures who operated in the shadows. But before we could fully deploy it, before we could activate its key, our team was compromised. David Thorne, my mentor, had managed to encrypt and disperse parts of the Phoenix code, scattering it across obscure servers, hoping it would be found by someone worthy. But the true activation key, the master override. I had kept that. Or rather, I had hidden it. So well, I almost forgot where myself. Now, after 15 years, Orion was coming for it. And they were using a terrified girl as their leverage. I spent the rest of the night mapping out possible scenarios, reactivating old mental protocols for evasion and surveillance. My suburban home, once a symbol of peace, now felt like a cage. I had to protect Emily and the children. I had to ensure their innocence remained untainted by the war I was about to re-enter. A surge of an emotion I hadn't felt in years coursed through me, fierce, primal rage. For years, I had believed that running, disappearing, was the only way to win. But Orion wouldn't stop. They were relentless. They had found Sarah. They had found me. And as long as Project Phoenix existed, they would hunt for it. The dawn was still hours away, but a new sun was rising within me. The sweet, unassuming Evelyn Reed was fading. Anne Swan, the ghost I thought I had buried, was slowly, painfully, stirring back to life. I was old, yes. My knees ached, and my vision wasn't what it used to be. But the mind, the will, the fire within, that was still there. And it burned brighter than ever. For my family. For Sarah. For David. And for every person Orion had ever silenced. I would meet Sarah. And then, I would make Orion regret ever disturbing my quiet life. The morning brew was a quaint little place, all mismatched chairs and the lingering aroma of roasted beans. At 6:15, it was still dark outside, the street lights casting long, distorted shadows. I parked my unassuming sedan a block away, walking the rest of the distance, my eyes scanning rooftops and alleyways, a forgotten habit resurfacing with chilling precision. The air was crisp, carrying the promise of a humid summer day. Sarah was already there, huddled at a small table by the window, nervously stirring a cup of untouched tea. Her face was even paler than before, her eyes sunken, ringed with dark circles. She looked like a child trying to shoulder the weight of the world. My heart ached for her, a deep, maternal pang. She was an innocent caught in my old war. I slid into the opposite seat, placing my hands on the table, palms down, a gesture of calm I hoped she would absorb. "Thank you for meeting me, Sarah," I said, my voice soft, but firm. "No one followed you?" She shook her head, her gaze fixed on her teacup. I don't think so. I took the bus, then walked a few blocks in the other direction before coming here. They're watching my apartment, I know it. Good, I affirmed. You're smart. Now, tell me everything. Who are they? How do they know about me? Sarah finally lifted her head, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. My father, she began, her voice a ragged whisper. Leonard Hoffman. He worked with you, didn't he? They showed me his picture. And then yours. My breath caught. Leonard. Leo. One of the best, a brilliant cryptographer, quiet but fiercely loyal. He had disappeared 15 years ago, along with others. We had assumed he was dead, another casualty. Leo? I whispered, a ghost of a name from a forgotten era. He was a good man. What happened to him? He disappeared, Sarah said, her voice cracking. Just vanished. My mother told me he left us, that he was a criminal. But I didn't believe her. She died last year, from a car accident, she added, her voice laced with bitter irony. And after she was gone, I started cleaning out his old things. In the attic, behind a loose floorboard, I found it. His diary. She reached into her worn backpack and pulled out a small, leather-bound journal. It looked old, fragile. It's full of coded messages, strange symbols. But there are parts one could understand. He wrote about a shadow corporation, about Corvus, about a Project Phoenix. And he wrote about Evelyn. He said you were the only one who could stop them, if they ever came back. My gaze was fixed on the diary, a tangible link to a past I'd desperately tried to bury. Leo had been a meticulous record keeper. My memory flickered back to a conversation, long ago, about a backup, a hidden archive for their project. He had always kept a personal journal. A few days ago, Sarah continued, her voice trembling, 2 men came to my apartment. The same men from the black SUV. They showed me pictures of my father. They knew about the diary. They said I had a choice, help them find Evelyn Reed and Project Phoenix, or I'd end up like my father. Or my mother. She shuddered, pressing her hands against her mouth to stifle a sob. They believe I have the key to Project Phoenix, I clarified, my mind already processing the new information. And they think you can get it from me. Sarah nodded miserably. They want it activated. They said it's a powerful weapon. They said you helped create it. Project Phoenix isn't a weapon in the way they think, I corrected her gently, my eyes hardening. It's a shield. A truth serum. It's an algorithm, a digital bomb designed to expose their entire network, their crimes, their manipulations. We created it to bring down the Shadow Corporation, Orion, as they're truly called. They're a global syndicate involved in industrial espionage, political assassination, data theft, and the development of dangerous technologies. Phoenix was meant to destroy them from the inside. A flicker of awe, mixed with terror, crossed Sarah's face. My father, he wrote about them. He called them the devourers of truth. And he wasn't wrong, I confirmed. We were close, a small team. Dedicated. Idealistic. And then we were compromised. One by one, we vanished. I was the last to go, the one who escaped with the key, the one who promised to hide it, to disappear, to live a normal life if I could. I thought I had succeeded. But why now? Sarah asked, voicing the question that had plagued me. Why after 15 years? I don't know, I admitted, a knot forming in my stomach. Unless they've discovered a way to activate Phoenix without the key, and they need my input to stop it. Or, more likely, they're preparing for something big, something that Phoenix could expose, and they need to neutralize it. Or they need its power for themselves. My gaze drifted to the diary. You said you found coded messages. Did you try to decode them? Sarah nodded. I'm not as good as my dad was, but I used some of the methods he taught me. There's a lot about data streams, algorithms, and a phrase that keeps coming up, the swan sings at dawn. My breath hitched. The swan sings at dawn. My old operational alias. Swan was me. And that phrase, that was the activation sequence, the final trigger phrase. The key. It wasn't a physical object. It was a cognitive key, embedded in memory, designed to be spoken, to be thought, in conjunction with a complex algorithm. And if Sarah had been trying to decipher her father's diary, using the methods he taught her. Sarah, I asked, my voice barely a whisper, have you, at any point, spoken that phrase out loud? Or tried to input it into anything online? Her eyes widened in horror. I tried to input it into an old encryption program my dad had on his computer. I just wanted to see what it did. I thought it was a password. A cold, icy dread settled in my heart. Project Phoenix wasn't just found. It was likely already stirring, disturbed from its slumber. And the key wasn't missing, it was active. Sarah had unknowingly provided the initial spark. Orion hadn't just found me, they had likely detected the activation attempts, traced them, and realized that the key was no longer dormant. And that I was still alive. My God, I murmured, the weight of the realization crushing me. They know because you told them. Unwittingly. Sarah's face crumpled. I didn't mean to, Evelyn. I just wanted to understand my father. I know, child, I said, reaching across the table and taking her trembling hand. This isn't your fault. This is theirs. They've been hunting for this for 15 years. You just gave them the final clue. My mind was now a whirlwind of calculations, a frantic reevaluation of the entire situation. The game had changed. They weren't just looking for the key anymore, they were looking to stop the inevitable, or worse, to seize control of it. And I, Evelyn Reed, the quiet grandmother, was the only one who truly understood the full extent of Project Phoenix. My quiet life in Oak Ridge was not just compromised, it was shattered. The old war was not just knocking on the door, it was already inside the house. And if I wanted to protect anyone, I had to stop being Evelyn Reed. I had to become Swan again. The weight of Sarah's revelation pressed down on me, heavy and cold. The swan sings at dawn. A coded phrase, a mnemonic key, deeply embedded in a sequence of thought patterns and data streams. It wasn't a password you could brute force, it was an activation sequence, and Sarah, in her innocent quest for answers, had inadvertently triggered the dormant beast. Orion hadn't just found the key, they had felt its faint stirring, traced it, and realized that Swan Honey was still alive and, more critically, that Phoenix was potentially waking up. My first thought, the most urgent one, was to verify Sarah's account, to understand the true state of Project Phoenix. For that, I needed a trusted ally, someone who spoke the same cryptic language of code and shadows. There was only one person left from my original team who might still be alive, still untainted, and still capable, Nathan Ghost Harper. Nathan was our tech genius, a hacker savant who could dance through firewalls like they were spider webs. When our team was compromised, he was supposed to have vanished overseas, a master of digital disappearances. Locating him would be a challenge, but I knew where to start: an old, forgotten safe house, a relic from a bygone era, deep in the sprawling wilderness just beyond Oak Ridge. It was a place designed to be found only by us, a dead drop for emergencies. "Sarah," I said, my voice now devoid of any tremor, sharp with renewed purpose. "You need to be careful. Act normally. Go back to your apartment. But if those men approach you again, if they try to force you, tell them you're making progress. Tell them I'm resistant, but you're working on it. Buy us time." She nodded, her eyes wide, taking in my transformed demeanor. The grandmother was gone. The strategist had emerged. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to find an old friend," I replied, standing up. "And then, we're going to put an end to this. For your father. For all of us." I gave her a small, reassuring smile, a promise of a fight. "Stay strong, Sarah." I left the coffee shop, the early morning light beginning to paint the sky with hues of rose and gold, utterly incongruous with the grim mission I was embarking on. I drove my sedan, carefully, deliberately, out of town, heading towards the less developed outskirts, where suburban sprawl gave way to dense forests and winding country roads. My heart, though still heavy with dread for my family, now beat with a different rhythm, a pulse of grim determination. The drive was long, the road progressively deteriorating into a dirt track. Eventually, I pulled over, burying my car beneath a thick canopy of trees, camouflaged by overgrown bushes. I retrieved a small backpack from the trunk, a pre-packed emergency kit I'd assembled years ago, then forgotten. It contained a compass, a map of the local wilderness, a small first aid kit, and a few energy bars. The weight of it on my back felt strangely familiar, almost comforting. The path through the woods was barely visible, overgrown with weeds and brambles. But I remembered it, every twist and turn, every landmark. The twisted oak, the moss-covered boulders, the stream that whispered secrets. It was a pilgrimage back into a life I'd sworn off, a descent into the shadows I thought I'd escaped. Finally, after what felt like hours, I reached it. A small, dilapidated cabin, nestled so deep in the woods it was almost invisible. Its windows were boarded up, its porch rotting. To any casual observer, it was just an abandoned shack. But I knew better. I moved to the back, pulling away a strategically placed loose board, revealing a small, rusted metal box. Inside, carefully sealed in plastic, was an old, clunky satellite phone and a small, encrypted thumb drive. My fingers, surprisingly agile, went to work. I plugged the thumb drive into the phone, entered a complex series of codes from memory, and initiated a burst transmission. It was an emergency signal, a call to a dormant network, designed to be almost untraceable. "Ghost to Swan," the message read. "Need contact. Project Phoenix compromised. Corvus active. Respond if alive." The waiting was agonizing. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Had Nathan survived? Had he truly vanished, or had Orion caught up to him too? Doubt, cold and insidious, crept in. But then, after what felt like an hour, the satellite phone buzzed. A faint, almost indecipherable signal. A coded reply. "Swan to Ghost. Alive. Location secure. Send details. Need secure channel." A wave of profound relief washed over me, so strong it almost brought me to my knees. Nathan was alive. My oldest, most trusted friend. A flicker of hope ignited in the darkness. We weren't alone in this. I typed out a rapid, condensed summary of the situation: Sarah's discovery, the inadvertent activation of Phoenix, Orion's hunt, the threat to my family. I then sent a rendezvous point, encrypted and disguised within layers of innocuous data, an old dead drop location we had used for critical information transfers. It was a small, derelict lighthouse on the coast, miles from Oak Ridge. My transformation was almost complete. Evelyn Reed, the peaceful grandmother, had vanished into the woods. Swan had emerged, older, wearier, but with a sharpened resolve. The years of quietude had not dulled her edges, they had merely allowed her to rest, to recharge. And now, she was ready to fight. Not for ideology, not for the thrill of the chase, but for the most primal of reasons, to protect her flock. Returning home from the wilderness, the scent of pine and damp earth clinging to my clothes, felt like stepping back into a dream that was rapidly turning into a nightmare. The familiar suburban street, bathed in the soft afternoon light, now seemed to hold a sinister edge. Every parked car felt like a surveillance post, every rustle of leaves a potential hidden movement. The tranquility I had so carefully cultivated felt paper-thin, ready to tear at any moment. I parked my car, trying to appear as if I'd simply been out for a leisurely drive. My heart was a persistent drum against my ribs, a warning signal that never quite quieted. As I walked towards my front door, a subtle shift in the air, a faint disturbance, prickled at my senses. A sixth sense, honed over years of living in the shadows, screamed that something was wrong. The front door, which I distinctly remembered locking with my usual double turn, was not quite right. The latch felt ever so slightly looser, the click not as solid. My hand instinctively went to the small, discreet knife I now carried concealed in my purse, a habit revived. I pushed the door open, my eyes sweeping the entryway, searching for any anomaly. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Emily would still be at work, the kids at school. I walked through the living room, my gaze meticulously cataloging every detail. The sofa cushions were arranged just as Emily had left them that morning. The books on the coffee table were undisturbed. My eyes drifted to the small, antique wooden chest in the corner, a cherished heirloom that held some of my most sentimental items, old letters, a pressed flower from my wedding bouquet, and a collection of Emily's childhood drawings. It was a box that rarely moved, always in the same spot, under the same painting. But it wasn't. It was subtly, almost imperceptibly, shifted. An inch to the left. Just enough to catch the trained eye. And then I noticed it. The lid, which I kept firmly latched, was slightly ajar. A wave of cold dread washed over me, a sickening realization that turned my blood to ice. They had been here. Inside my sanctuary. Inside my home. My fingers trembled as I approached the chest. I gently lifted the lid. Everything seemed to be in its place, the letters, the flower. But then I saw it. The small, worn sketchbook, filled with Emily's crayon masterpieces from kindergarten, crude stick figures, brightly colored houses, clumsy suns, was missing. Just that. Nothing else of value, nothing that would suggest a common burglar. Only the sketchbook, a seemingly innocuous item, but one filled with the innocence and joy of my daughter's childhood. It wasn't a robbery. It was a message. A chilling, undeniable message. We were here. We know what you cherish. We know who you love. They had been in my home, breathing the same air, touching the same objects. They had been so close to Emily. To Lily and Noah. The thought ignited a primal fury within me, a protective fire that burned away the last vestiges of Evelyn Reed's quiet resignation. Later that afternoon, Emily returned home, humming a cheerful tune. She noticed my unusual quietness. "Mom? Is everything all right? You're even more subdued than this morning." I forced a smile, a shaky imitation of my usual serene expression. "Just a bit tired, darling. And I think I'm coming down with something." I hated lying to her, but the alternative was unthinkable. How could I explain that her unassuming mother was a ghost from a past that hunted her, and that her children were now potential targets in a war she didn't even know existed? "Oh, and Mom," Emily said, as she went to put away her purse, "did you notice that black SUV parked down the street earlier? Across from the Miller's house. It was there for a while, just sitting. Kind of strange, don't you think?" She wrinkled her nose, dismissively. Must have been someone waiting for the Millers, I suppose. My heart hammered. Emily had seen it. The black Suburban. The same one from the supermarket parking lot. They weren't just observing from afar, they were establishing a presence, making their intentions clear. They were tightening the noose. Probably just a repairman, dear, I said, my voice deliberately casual, even as my mind raced, creating plausible scenarios, calculating risk. You know how new neighbors always have work being done. My internal monologue, however, was a torrent of frantic strategizing. My grandchildren. Lily and Noah. My innocent, trusting grandchildren. The thought of them, vulnerable and unaware, at the mercy of Orion, sent a cold wave of terror through me. They had taken Emily's childhood drawings. What else would they take? That night, after everyone was asleep, I didn't just re-enter my study. I transformed it into a command center. I retrieved tiny, motion-activated cameras from the hidden compartment, devices I'd thought I'd never use again, and discreetly installed them around the perimeter of the house, linking them to an old, secure server hidden in my basement. I activated dormant surveillance programs on my laptop, meticulously sweeping my home network for any intrusions, any signs of remote access. I even checked the local weather patterns, cross-referencing them with news reports, searching for any anomalies that might hint at a larger operation. The image of the stolen sketchbook, those vibrant, childish drawings, was burned into my mind. It was a declaration of war, a personal affront. They wanted to rattle me, to show me their reach. And it worked. But it didn't break me. It forged me anew. I was no longer just Swan. I was a mother protecting her young. A grandmother safeguarding her legacy. And Orion, the mighty constellation that thought it could dominate the darkness, was about to learn that even the oldest, seemingly most fragile swan could still fight. And when pushed to the brink, she would fight with a ferocity they could never anticipate. The encrypted message from Nathan crackled to life on the satellite phone, a lifeline thrown across a vast ocean of forgotten years. Swan. Confirmed rendezvous. Midnight. Lighthouse Point. Come alone. Short, precise, and entirely Nathan. Even after 15 years, he hadn't lost his touch for efficiency. The thought of facing Nathan again stirred a complex mix of emotions within me. Relief, undoubtedly. Hope. But also a deep, melancholic sorrow for the lives we'd all lost, the innocence we'd shed. He was one of the few who understood the cost of our past, the weight of the secrets we carried. I spent the rest of the day in a state of carefully modulated tension, performing the rituals of Evelyn Reed, watering the roses, knitting a few rows on a baby blanket for a neighbor, preparing a simple dinner. Emily commented on my renewed energy, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath my calm facade. It was a testament to years of practice, to the art of deception I had perfected. As midnight approached, I slipped out of the house once more. This time, there was no pretense of a drive. I left a note for Emily, feigning an urgent need to help an old friend in a neighboring town, stressing that my phone would be off due to poor reception. It was a flimsy excuse, but in her trusting nature, Emily would likely accept it. The guilt was a heavy stone in my stomach, but the stakes were too high for sentimentality. Lighthouse Point was a desolate stretch of coastline, miles from Oak Ridge, where the crashing waves drowned out any casual conversation. The old lighthouse, its light long since extinguished, stood like a solitary sentinel against the dark, churning sea. The air was cool and salty, carrying the tang of impending rain. I arrived first, a shadowy figure against the moonless sky, moving with a fluid grace that belied my age. I scanned the area, my eyes sweeping the rocks, the abandoned shacks, the winding path. Every shadow, every gust of wind, was analyzed. And then, I saw him. A figure emerged from the darkness near the base of the lighthouse, moving with the same silent, almost ethereal quality I remembered. Nathan Harper. The ghost. He was older, of course. His dark hair was streaked with gray, and there were deeper lines etched around his piercing blue eyes. But those eyes, still sharp and intelligent, held the same spark of brilliant mischief and weary cynicism I remembered. He stopped a few feet away, his hands clasped behind his back, observing me with a steady gaze. "Swan," he said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper, weathered by time and perhaps by secrets. "I almost thought you were truly gone." "Ghost," I replied, my voice a little rougher than I intended, emotion catching in my throat. "It's good to see you alive." "Survival is a talent, wouldn't you say?" he murmured, a faint, sardonic smile playing on his lips. "Though not one all of us possessed." His gaze lingered on me. "You've changed. You look domestic. It suits you. And you look like you've been living off the grid and hacking the global financial market for fun," I retorted, a ghost of a smile touching my own lips. It was an old banter, a comfortable, dangerous familiarity. We sat on a cold, smooth rock, the roar of the ocean a natural sound dampener. I recounted everything: Sarah's accidental activation, the Corvus tattoo, the black Suburban, the stolen sketchbook. Nathan listened, his expression grim, occasionally nodding, his eyes never leaving my face. "So, Phoenix is stirring," he finally said, his voice quiet. "I always knew they'd come for it. Or for you, once it showed signs of life." "How much do you know about Orion's current operations?" I asked, cutting to the chase. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "More than I'd like. They've grown, Evelyn. Vastly. They're no longer just a shadow corporation, they're a global syndicate. Industrial espionage, political manipulation, arms dealing, even human trafficking, they've expanded their reach into every dirty corner of the world. They've infiltrated governments, financial institutions, media outlets. They're like a cancer, metastasizing everywhere." "And Project Phoenix," I pressed. "What exactly would it do now?" Phoenix, in its original form, was a digital weapon designed to expose their entire infrastructure, Nathan explained, his eyes distant, remembering. "It would unleash a torrent of encrypted data, financial records, communication logs, every dirty secret. It would be a global data dump, irreversible. A digital EMP that would flatline their operations and expose their key players to the world. It would be total, undeniable annihilation for them." "And the key?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Sarah told me she tried to input the swan sings that dawn into an old program on her father's computer. Could that have been enough to activate it?" Nathan's eyes widened. "Leo's old program, he built a failsafe, a partial activation protocol. If the phrase was input into that specific program, it would begin a slow, almost undetectable trickle of data, a preparatory phase for the full Phoenix launch. It would also alert their systems to a potential breach, but it wouldn't be enough for them to fully understand or stop it yet. They'd know something was coming, and that you were involved. So they're hunting me for the full activation," I concluded. "Or to stop it from going through." "Exactly," Nathan confirmed. "They need to either retrieve the key or prevent the full launch. And they'll do anything. Including threatening your family." His expression hardened. "One of their top brass now, a familiar name, actually. Arthur Hemlock. Remember him? Our old mentor. The one who taught us everything? He defected. Betrayed us all. Now he's one of Orion's chief strategists." The name hit me like a physical blow. Arthur Hemlock. The man who had shaped me, taught me, molded me into the operative I had become. My mentor. My friend. My betrayer. The knowledge that he was alive, and at the head of the organization that was hunting me, sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. This wasn't just a fight against an abstract enemy, it was deeply personal. "Hemlock," I repeated, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. "Of course. He always had a flair for the dramatic, and a hunger for power. He knew about Phoenix. He knew about its true capabilities. He also knows your weaknesses, Nathan warned, his gaze intense. He knows what you cherish. Your family, Evelyn. They are your Achilles heel. My jaw clenched. They are my strength, Nathan. And I will not let him touch them. My resolve, already burning fiercely, now blazed with a cold, righteous anger. We have to activate Phoenix. We have to finish what we started. It won't be easy, Nathan cautioned. Orion is more powerful than ever. And Hemlock, he's a snake. Cunning and ruthless. But I'm with you, Swan. Always have been. What's the plan? I looked out at the churning sea, the dark horizon. The peaceful life of Evelyn Reed was gone. Now, only Swan remained. And Swan had a plan. A dangerous, desperate plan to protect her family, to honor the fallen, and to finally bring down the empire of shadows that was Orion. The game was no longer about survival. It was about absolute victory. The conversation with Nathan had solidified my resolve, sharpened my focus. Arthur Hemlock. The name resonated with a bitter ache, a memory of trust broken and idealism shattered. He wasn't just an enemy, he was a wound from the past, reopened. But now, that wound fueled my determination. Nathan and I spent the remainder of the night, and a good portion of the following day, holed up in a secure, abandoned bunker he maintained, another relic of our forgotten lives. We pored over digital schematics, satellite maps, and communication intercepts he'd quietly gathered over the years. We were two old soldiers, scarred but unbroken, rekindling the embers of a long-dormant war. Nathan confirmed my fears. The partial activation by Sarah had indeed alerted Orion. Their systems showed a minor, intermittent data leak, just enough to signal that Phoenix was stirring, but not enough to pinpoint its source or fully comprehend its imminent threat. That's why they were hunting me. I was the one who held the master key, the full sequence to unleash its devastating power. They're not just looking to stop Phoenix, Evelyn, Nathan warned, his fingers flying across multiple keyboards. They're looking to turn it. To hijack its power, to use it against their own enemies, or even against us. Hemlock always coveted Phoenix, he just wanted it for the wrong reasons. The bunker was a hive of activity, a symphony of clicking keyboards and hushed strategic discussions. Nathan, a whirlwind of technical genius, began preparing a decoy Phoenix, a corrupted, booby-trapped version of the virus, designed to buy us critical time and perhaps even incapacitate some of Orion's systems if they tried to hack it. Just as the sun began to set, casting long, orange shadows across the dusty floor of the bunker, my burner phone buzzed again. It was Sarah. Her voice was barely a whisper, ragged with fear. Evelyn? They were at the market again. They found me after my shift. 2 of them. They said you have until tomorrow night. They know where your daughter lives. They know about Lily and Noah. Her voice broke into a terrified sob. They said if you don't show up with the key by tomorrow night, they'll make sure your family suffers. They'll make an example of them. A cold, visceral rage, primal and absolute, coursed through me. My hand instinctively clenched into a fist, my knuckles white. They had crossed a line. The threat wasn't just to me anymore, it was to my innocent, unsuspecting family. Lily's bright laughter, Noah's sticky hugs, Emily's trusting smile, they were all now bargaining chips in Hemlock's twisted game. Where did they tell you to send me, Sarah? I asked, my voice dangerously calm, the fury a tightly coiled spring beneath. The old abandoned warehouse district, near the docks, she whispered. Number 7. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. sharp. Okay, Sarah, I said, my voice hardening with resolve. Listen carefully. Do exactly as I tell you. Go home, pack a small bag, just essentials. Tell no one. At midnight, go to the bus station. There will be a ticket waiting for you, under a different name, to a town 3 states away. Go there. Don't look back. Don't contact anyone. Nathan will monitor you from a distance, ensure your safety once you're gone. You've done enough, child. You're free. But, what about you? She asked, her voice laced with desperate concern. I'm going to finish this, I replied, the words a vow etched in stone. Go, Sarah. Live. That's all I ask. I hung up, the weight of the decision settling over me. There was no other choice. I had to face them. I had to go to Warehouse 7. Not just to protect my family, but to honor the memory of Leo, of David, and all the others Hemlock had betrayed. They gave me an ultimatum, I told Nathan, turning from the phone, my eyes blazing with a fierce determination. Warehouse 7. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. They want the key. And they're threatening Emily and the children. Nathan's face was grim. Hemlock's signature move. Always personal. Always ruthless. It's a trap, Evelyn. A very obvious, very dangerous trap. I know, I said, a faint, mirthless smile touching my lips. But I'm going anyway. We need to buy more time for Phoenix to fully activate, or at least for your decoy to do its work. And I need to face Hemlock. Once and for all. Then we make sure it's their trap that closes on them, Nathan declared, his fingers already flying across the keyboards, a renewed energy in his movements. I'll be running remote support, Evelyn. I'll provide you with comms, a clear escape route, and I'll be ready to launch the real Phoenix the moment you give the signal. Or, if something goes wrong, the decoy. We spent the remaining hours meticulously planning every detail, my entry, potential surveillance points, communication protocols, emergency exfiltration. Every contingency was considered, every weakness analyzed. I was older, yes. My body wasn't as agile as it once was. But my mind was sharper, my experience deeper, and my motivation, the fierce, protective love for my family, was an unshakable force. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, I looked at the old photographs I'd brought with me, Emily as a child, Lily and Noah laughing in my garden. They won't touch you, I whispered, a silent vow carried on the wind. Evelyn Reed was now fully subsumed. Swan, the shadow operative, the silent protector, was ready. The trap was set. And I, the unassuming grandmother, was about to walk right into it, not as a victim, but as a predator disguised as prey. The next morning, the house was a flurry of innocent activity. Noah demanded his special dinosaur-shaped pancakes, Lily proudly showed off a new drawing, and Emily, bustling with her usual energy, juggled calls for her design projects. I watched them, my heart a complex mix of aching love and steely resolve. Each smile, each casual touch, each innocent question was a precious memory I was engraving into my soul, unsure if I would have the chance to create more. Mom, Emily said, as she prepared to leave for work, you seem a bit distant today. Are you sure you're feeling okay? Your friend, is she all right? I forced a reassuring smile, pulling her into a tight hug. It lingered a moment longer than usual, a silent goodbye. She's doing much better, darling. I might need to pop over there again tonight, just for a quick check-in. Her situation is delicate, you know. I might not be back until late, or even early tomorrow. I gave her my most convincing concerned friend look. Don't you worry your head about me. Just make sure Lily gets her homework done and Noah doesn't eat too many sweets. Emily, bless her heart, simply nodded, used to my occasional, vaguely explained trips. All right, Mom. Be careful. Always, darling. Always. The word felt like a hollow echo, a cruel irony given the path I was about to walk. As soon as the house emptied, a silence descended, heavy and profound. The ordinary objects around me, the half-finished knitting project on the sofa, the cookbook open on the kitchen counter, the children's shoes by the door, suddenly seemed imbued with a fragile preciousness. This tranquil domesticity, this peaceful existence, was everything I was fighting for. I went to my study, the command center Nathan and I had briefly established. My combat kit was laid out on the desk, not a weapon cache, but a collection of carefully chosen items. My old, nondescript smartphone, now loaded with Nathan's encrypted comms app. A small, wickedly sharp utility knife, the one I had carried for years, always hidden, always polished, but never once used for its intended purpose. It felt heavy in my hand, a cold promise. And the most crucial item, a plain black USB stick, containing the decoy Phoenix Nathan had painstakingly crafted, a corrupted, booby-trapped Trojan disguised as the real deal. I dressed in dark, unassuming clothes, a dark gray sweater, black jeans, sturdy, silent walking boots. Practical, invisible. I tied my silver hair back in a tight bun, out of the way. I looked in the mirror, and for a moment, I saw her, Swan. Older, yes, her face etched with the lines of a life lived, but her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and filled with an unflinching resolve. The years of quietude had not dimmed her spirit, they had refined it, tempered it into steel. This isn't about vengeance, I told myself, my reflection staring back at me. This is about protection. About ensuring that what happened to Leo, to David, to our team, never happens again. And that Emily, Lily, and Noah remain untouched by the shadows I once called home. I took a deep breath, the familiar scent of my home filling my lungs one last time. My movements were deliberate, economical. Every item in my bag was placed with precision. My heart was no longer pounding with fear, but with a cold, clear focus. The transformation was complete. Evelyn Reed had stepped aside. Swan was in control. Before I left, I wrote another note, sealing it in an envelope marked to Emily, only if I don't return by dawn. It contained no explanations of my past, no confessions of espionage. Instead, it was a letter filled with love, with guidance for raising Lily and Noah, with instructions for handling my meager estate, and a simple, heartfelt message of how much I cherished them. It was a letter from Evelyn Reed, the grandmother, for the life she had hoped to continue. I placed it discreetly in the antique chest, beneath the remaining childhood drawings, a silent prayer that it would never need to be read. As I stepped out of the front door, locking it behind me with a solid click, the setting sun cast long, dramatic shadows. The suburban street, usually bustling with life, was quiet, as if holding its breath. The air was still, expectant. I hailed a taxi a few blocks away, a deliberate choice to avoid my car being tracked. Warehouse District, near the docks, please, I instructed the driver, my voice calm, steady. The old Warehouse District. A place of forgotten industry, crumbling brick, and hushed secrets. A fitting stage for the final act. Inside the taxi, I pulled out my phone. Nathan's secure app blinked with an incoming message. Ready on my end, Swan. Remote access established. Decoy primed. Real Phoenix awaiting your signal. Stay safe. Ghost out. I sent a quick, coded reply, understood. Watch my back. Swan in. My gaze drifted out the window, watching the familiar landscape of Oak Ridge recede, replaced by grittier, more industrial scenes. The comforting glow of the town lights faded, giving way to the stark, unforgiving illumination of street lamps and the dark, brooding shapes of warehouses. My body was older, yes. My joints sometimes ached, my reflexes weren't as lightning fast as they once were. But the years of hiding, of observation, of quiet strategizing, had honed a different kind of strength, patience, cunning, and an unshakable will. I was not a brute force warrior, I was a strategist, a survivor, a ghost in the machine. And Arthur Hemlock, my former mentor, the man who had traded his soul for power, was about to learn that even an old swan, pushed to the brink, could still unleash a storm. The past had finally caught up. But this time, I wouldn't run. I would turn and face it, and fight to protect the future. The taxi dropped me off a few blocks from the designated rendezvous point, a precaution Nathan and I had agreed upon. The air in the old Warehouse District was heavy with the smell of damp concrete, rust, and something faintly metallic, a forgotten industrial scent that felt appropriately grim. The streetlights here were sparse, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with every gust of wind. The skeletal outlines of abandoned factories rose against the inky sky, like gravestones for a lost era. Warehouse 7 was a hulking, imposing structure, its corrugated metal walls scarred with graffiti and rust. Most of its windows were broken, gaping black holes that seemed to watch me as I approached. There was no light, no discernible movement, just a pervasive, ominous silence that pressed in on me from all sides. It felt like walking into the mouth of a sleeping beast. My senses were on high alert. I moved slowly, silently, hugging the shadows, my eyes meticulously scanning every detail. A subtle glint of metal on a distant rooftop, a sniper? A faint whisper of static in my ear from Nathan's comms, a reassuring digital hum. "Clear path to entry point, Swan," he murmured. No active patrols detected outside. 2 heat signatures inside, near the center. "Proceed with caution." I found the entry point he had identified, a partially pried open service door at the rear, disguised by a pile of discarded crates. It was a crude attempt at stealth, almost an invitation. They wanted me to come in. They wanted to corner me. I slipped inside, the rusty hinges groaning faintly despite my careful touch. The interior was a cavernous expanse, filled with the ghosts of industry. Moonlight streamed through the broken windows high above, casting eerie shafts of light and shadow across the dusty concrete floor. Towering shelves, long since empty, stretched into the darkness, creating a maze of potential hiding spots. My breath feathered in the cold air, each exhalation a cloud of white. I moved deeper into the warehouse, my boots barely scuffing the concrete. Nathan's voice was a low hum in my ear. 2 contacts, Swan. Central. They're waiting. As I rounded a stack of towering, empty pallets, I saw them. 2 figures, silhouetted against a single, bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. One, tall and imposing, stood with his back to me, his shoulders broad. The other, shorter, thinner, was pacing nervously. These were the men from the black Suburban, the ones who had terrorized Sarah. And then, the taller figure turned. My heart lurched, a cold, sickening lurch. Arthur Hemlock. He hadn't changed much, not really. Still impeccably dressed, even in this desolate setting, his dark suit a stark contrast to the grime and decay. His face, once lined with the quiet intelligence of a mentor, was now sharper, more defined, etched with a cynical cunning that twisted his features into something cruel. His eyes, once a deep, thoughtful hazel, now held a cold, predatory glint. The years had hardened him, refined him into a truly formidable adversary. He smiled then, a thin, humorless smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Evelyn," he said, his voice surprisingly soft, almost a caress, but laced with a venomous undertone. "Or should I say, Swan? It's been a long time. 15 years, to be precise. You've aged well. The quiet life, I assume? It almost made you forget who you truly are, didn't it?" His words were designed to provoke, to strip away the layers of Evelyn Reed and expose the operative beneath. And for a moment, they almost succeeded. A surge of old anger, old betrayal, threatened to overwhelm me. But I pushed it down, maintaining my calm facade. "Arthur," I replied, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. "You look prosperous. Betrayal seems to have agreed with you." His smile widened, a flicker of genuine amusement in his eyes. "Always the sharp tongue, Evelyn. I knew you'd come. You always had a weakness for sentimentality. Your family, wasn't it? A beautiful little girl, a grandson, oh, and a delightful daughter. Emily, I believe. Her drawings were quite charming, by the way. A little rough around the edges, but very expressive." My blood ran cold. The stolen sketchbook. He was rubbing it in, using my family as a weapon. The fury inside me flared, hot and sharp, but I clamped down on it, refusing to give him the satisfaction. "You have what you want," I said, my voice low, dangerous. "Let's finish this." The key to Project Phoenix. You want it, you get it. My family is off limits. You touch them, and I swear, Arthur, you will regret it more than anything you've ever done. Such bravado, for an old woman, he chuckled, a cold, grating sound. You're in no position to make demands, Evelyn. You're alone. Outnumbered. Outgunned. And I have all the leverage. You always were predictable. Sentimental. That was your flaw, wasn't it? Your greatest strength, and your greatest weakness. He made a gesture to one of his men, a brutish giant with a shaved head. The man stepped forward, holding a tablet. On the screen, a live feed flickered into view, my living room. Emily was there, curled on the sofa, reading a book, oblivious. Lily and Noah were already asleep in their beds, their doors slightly ajar. My sanctuary, violated, exposed. My heart twisted, a searing pain. This was it. The absolute, undeniable proof of their reach, their ruthlessness. My family, caught in the crosshairs. But instead of breaking me, it solidified my resolve. It sharpened the edges of my focus, turning the fear into a cold, hard diamond of determination. You see, Evelyn, Hemlock continued, his voice dripping with condescension, I always admired your intellect. Your ability to see the bigger picture. Phoenix was your masterpiece, yours and Thorn's. A truly remarkable piece of destructive software. But now, it will be my masterpiece. Once I have the full activation key, I will turn its power to Orion's advantage. And you, my dear, will witness the true dawn of a new era. An era of absolute control. He extended a hand. Now, the key, Evelyn. Give it to me. And perhaps, just perhaps, your family might live to see another dawn. Or, we can do this the hard way. I looked at the live feed of my innocent family. And then I looked at Arthur Hemlock, the man who had traded his soul for power. My decision was made. There would be no surrender. Only battle. The live feed of my living room, showing Emily peacefully reading, Lily and Noah asleep in their beds, hung in the air like a taunt. Hemlock's smug, expectant face, illuminated by the cold light of the bare bulb, was a portrait of insidious triumph. My rage, a contained fire until now, threatened to burst its banks. But I held it, channeling it into a laser-sharp focus. This was it. The moment of truth. You speak of control, Arthur, I said, my voice low and steady, belying the storm within. But you've always been a fool. Phoenix was never about control. It was about liberation. About exposing the rot you fostered. Hemlock merely chuckled. Empty rhetoric, Evelyn. Give me the key. The one Thorn entrusted you with. The true activation sequence. Or do you want to watch your perfect little suburban life burn, starting with your precious family? He gestured to the tablet held by his brute, the image of my unsuspecting daughter frozen on the screen. I reached into my bag, my movements slow, deliberate, building the suspense. I pulled out the black USB stick. It looked innocuous, a simple piece of technology. But its contents were a digital time bomb. This is it, Arthur, I said, holding it up, letting the faint light catch its surface. The key to Project Phoenix. His eyes gleamed with avarice, a hunger for power that had consumed him. Excellent. Hand it over. Not so fast, I countered, a faint, sardonic smile playing on my lips. There's a verbal component, a trigger phrase. Without it, this is just a very expensive paperweight. You know that, don't you? It's part of the original design. Our failsafe. Hemlock's eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion. He knew I was right, he was part of the original team, after all. Speak the phrase, then. Oh, I'll speak it, I promised. But first, a little show of good faith. Your men. They're going to back away. And you're going to put that tablet down. Slowly. The brute hesitated, looking at Hemlock for instruction. Hemlock's gaze was fixed on me, trying to gauge my bluff. He was good, but I was better. I had years more experience in the subtle art of misdirection. Do it, Hemlock snapped, his patience wearing thin. She's just an old woman. The key is what matters. The brute reluctantly placed the tablet on a nearby crate, the live feed still visible, a cruel reminder. The other operative, a leaner, more agile man, shifted his weight, his hand hovering near a concealed weapon. They both took a step back, but their eyes remained fixed on me. Good, I said, my voice rising, carrying through the cavernous space. Now, this is for Leo. For David. For all the lives you've destroyed. And then, I spoke the phrase. Not the full, intricate sequence I held in my mind, but a carefully truncated version, designed to buy us time. The swan sings. As the words left my lips, I subtly pressed a hidden button on the side of the USB stick, a custom modification Nathan had added. It initiated the decoy virus. A low, guttural growl rumbled through the warehouse. Not from me, but from Nathan's comms. It's starting, Swan. Decoy is active. Systems are going haywire on their end. I'm initiating the real Phoenix. Now. Suddenly, the single bare bulb above us flickered violently, then plunged the warehouse into near-total darkness. The only light now came from the distant moon through the broken windows, and the faint, glowing screen of the tablet on the crate, which was now displaying a rapidly cycling series of error messages and then, data streams. Thousands of lines of code, names, dates, financial transactions, exploding onto the screen. Chaos erupted. Hemlock cursed, his voice a snarl. What have you done, you old fool? What you never dared, Arthur. I retorted, my voice ringing with triumph. I activated Phoenix. The real one. The brute and the leaner operative, disoriented by the sudden darkness, scrambled. One fumbled for a flashlight, the other barked into a comms device. This was my moment. I didn't fight like a commando. I fought like a ghost. As the brute approached, swinging wildly in the dark, I ducked under his arm, using his momentum against him. My foot swept out, catching his ankle, sending him sprawling with a surprised grunt. Before he could recover, I kicked his comms device away, then landed a precise, agonizing blow to his solar plexus. He doubled over, gasping for air. The leaner operative, more dangerous, pulled a gun, its metallic glint catching the faint moonlight. Freeze, old woman, he barked. But I wasn't there. I had already melted into the deeper shadows, using the towering shelves as cover. I knew this environment better than they did. I knew how to disappear. Nathan. I hissed into my comms. Status. Full Phoenix launch initiated. Nathan's voice, though strained, was exhilarated. Orion's main servers are buckling. Data streaming globally. They're trying to contain it, but it's too late. The world is watching. Hemlock, now a frantic silhouette, was yelling into his own comms, his voice laced with panic. Abort. Abort Phoenix. Find her. She has the key. It's not the one she gave you, you fool. The key, Arthur? I called out from the darkness, my voice echoing, disembodied. The key wasn't on that USB, you arrogant fool. It was in Leo's diary. It was The Swan Sings at Dawn. Sarah, his daughter, spoke it, trying to understand her father's notes. She activated the initial sequence. The true key wasn't an object, Arthur, it was a cognitive trigger, a memory, combined with an algorithm embedded in the diary. Sarah merely provided the spark. And I provided the accelerant. Hemlock froze, the realization slowly dawning on his face. His eyes, even in the gloom, showed a flicker of profound defeat. He finally understood. The very tool he had tried to exploit, the innocent girl he had terrorized, had been his undoing. The leaner operative fired a shot, the deafening blast echoing through the warehouse, but it was just a wild guess, hitting a metal beam with a clang. "No, Arthur," I said, stepping back into a sliver of moonlight, my face grim but resolute. "You were wrong about me. My sentimentality is my strength. It fueled me. And now, the phoenix rises. Not for your control, but for the truth." And then, a distant wail began to pierce the night, sirens. Police, FBI. Nathan hadn't just unleashed Phoenix, he had also dropped a digital breadcrumb trail, leading law enforcement right to Orion's doorstep and to this warehouse. Hemlock's face, a mask of fury and despair, turned towards the source of the sirens. He was trapped. The battle of wits was over. And the old swan had won. The wail of approaching sirens grew louder, piercing the darkness of the warehouse district, a cacophony of justice closing in. Inside Warehouse 7, chaos reigned. The brute was still groaning on the floor, clutching his stomach. The leaner operative, his face contorted in frustrated rage, frantically tried to pinpoint my location, firing another wild shot that ricocheted off a metal support beam. Arthur Hemlock stood frozen, caught between the crashing wave of incoming law enforcement and the realization of his utter defeat. His eyes, fixed on the tablet screen where Orion's deepest secrets were now cascading across the digital ether, reflected a chilling mix of fury and despair. The empire he had built on betrayal and ruthlessness was crumbling before his very eyes, destroyed by the very project he had coveted. "Nathan." I hissed into my calms, my voice triumphant but still urgent. "Confirmation of law enforcement contact?" "Confirmed, Swan." Nathan's voice, though slightly breathless, was exhilarated. "FBI, local police, even a few federal marshals." The Phoenix data dump created a global alarm, tracing back to Orion's central servers. "Your warehouse location was a secondary beacon. They're surrounding the building now." "Good," I replied, my gaze fixed on Hemlock. "Get out of there, Ghost. Your work here is done." "Likewise, Swan," Nathan chuckled, a sound of profound relief. "See you on the other side." Ghost out. The line went silent. I knew my window was closing. I was not a government agent, nor did I have official authority to be here. My involvement, however noble, could still land me in a very uncomfortable position, exposing the very past I had meticulously buried. I had done what I came to do. Now, it was time to vanish, to become the ghost once more. As the sirens reached a crescendo, flashlights began to beam through the broken windows, followed by urgent shouts. "FBI. Come out with your hands up." Hemlock finally stirred, tearing his gaze from the doomed tablet screen. He looked at me, a silent, venomous accusation in his eyes. He saw the grim satisfaction on my face, the unyielding resolve that had not broken under his threats. "You think you've won, Evelyn," he snarled, his voice hoarse with rage. "This is just the beginning. Orion has many heads. And I'll find you again." "No, Arthur," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "This is the end of your reign. And I'll be long gone before you ever see the light of day again." Just as the warehouse doors burst open, flooding the space with blinding floodlights and heavily armed agents, I moved. I didn't engage, didn't fight. I simply dissolved into the shadows, using the chaotic confusion to my advantage. Years of training kicked in. I slipped through a gap in the rear wall, a forgotten ventilation shaft, a route Nathan had identified as a secondary escape. I crawled through the narrow, dusty passage, my knees protesting, but my will unyielding. I could hear the shouts of agents, the clatter of weapons, the sounds of Hemlock and his men being apprehended. A grim satisfaction settled over me. Justice, in its own convoluted way, had finally arrived. I emerged into a deserted alleyway several blocks away, far from the cordon. The air was cool and fresh, free of the dust and tension of the warehouse. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the adrenaline slowly receding, leaving a profound weariness in its wake. My muscles ached, my heart still thumped, but a sense of profound relief, a quiet triumph, settled over me. I walked the remaining distance back to my car, a solitary figure moving through the pre-dawn streets. As I drove away from the industrial district, the first faint hint of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, a gentle pink and orange blush promising a new day. And with it, a new reality. The global news would soon be consumed by the revelations of Project Phoenix. Orion, the shadow corporation, would be exposed. Governments would fall, powerful figures would be disgraced, and the world would finally see the insidious rot that had festered in the shadows for so long. And I, Evelyn Reed, would be nowhere to be found, just another unassuming grandmother, dissolving back into the quiet fabric of suburban life. My identity as Swan was now a memory, a ghost from a past that was finally, truly, put to rest. I had faced my demons, confronted my betrayer, and protected my family. The war was over. For now. But I was no longer the same Evelyn Reed who had walked into the Oak Ridge market just 2 nights ago. The veneer of innocence, though still present for my family, was now backed by an unshakable core of steel. I had remembered who I was. And I had embraced it. The drive back to Oak Ridge was surreal. The world was still asleep, oblivious to the digital earthquake that had just ravaged the deepest shadows of global power. The news reports, when they finally broke, would paint a picture of a massive, unprecedented data leak, an anonymous whistleblower exposing a sprawling criminal enterprise. They would never mention a retired operative, an aging grandmother, or the accidental spark ignited by a frightened young woman. My name, Evelyn Reed, would remain untainted, unheard in the roar of the impending scandal. I pulled into my driveway just as the first sliver of golden light kissed the tops of the oak trees. The house looked exactly as I had left it, peaceful, serene, a beacon of normalcy. I let myself in, locking the door softly behind me. The scent of coffee and pancakes, faint from yesterday, still lingered, a comforting, grounding aroma. My first act was to check on Emily. Her bedroom door was ajar. I peeked in. She was still asleep, a gentle smile on her face. Lily and Noah's rooms were quiet, their small, innocent forms tucked under their blankets. They were safe. The raw, desperate fear that had consumed me for the past 2 days slowly began to recede, replaced by a profound, bone-deep relief. I went to the kitchen and brewed a fresh pot of coffee, the mundane ritual a soothing balm. My body ached, a testament to the night's exertions, but my mind was clear, at peace. Or, at least, as much peace as someone like me could ever truly achieve. A few hours later, just as I was tidying up the kitchen, my burner phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number, blocked. My heart gave a small jump, but I answered, my voice steady. Evelyn? It was Sarah. Her voice, though still quiet, held a new note of strength, of relief. I'm safe. I made it. Just checking in, like you said. Good, Sarah, I replied, a genuine smile touching my lips. I'm glad to hear it. Are you all right? Yes, she said, a faint, tearful chuckle. The people here, they're helping me. They're calling me a key witness. My father, he'd be proud, wouldn't he? They told me what Project Phoenix did. It's amazing. It's going to change everything. He would be incredibly proud, Sarah, I assured her, my voice thick with emotion. You were very brave. And you helped change the world. What about you? She asked, her voice tinged with concern. Are you safe? Did you make it out? I made it out, dear, I confirmed, looking out into my blooming rose garden. I'm home. And everything is as it should be. Don't worry about me. Focus on your new life. And never stop seeking the truth. Thank you, Evelyn, she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. For everything. You're welcome, child. Now go. Live. I hung up, a sense of closure settling over me. Sarah would be all right. She would find her own path, her own peace. Later that day, the news channels were ablaze. Global corporate espionage ring exposed, Orion syndicate crumbles, political figures implicated in worldwide scandal. The headlines screamed of arrests, investigations, and a monumental shift in the global power dynamic. It was happening. Phoenix had risen, and its fire was cleansing. I sat in my garden, watching Lily and Noah play a vigorous game of tag, their laughter bright and unburdened. Emily, now back from work, was watering her prize-winning petunias, completely oblivious to the cataclysm I had just averted. My life, on the surface, remained unchanged. The white picket fence still stood, the roses still bloomed, the children still laughed. But I was different. The weight of secrecy that had pressed down on me for 15 years had lifted. I was no longer merely Evelyn Reed, the quiet grandmother. I was Evelyn Reed, the woman who had faced her past, resurrected her true self, and fought for her family with every fiber of her being. The Swan was still there, a deeper, stronger current beneath the gentle surface. I understood now that a quiet life wasn't about forgetting who you were, or burying your past. It was about choosing how you lived with it. My past hadn't been a burden to be discarded, it had been a crucible that forged my strength, my resilience, my unwavering will to protect. I watched Noah chase Lily through the sprinklers, their joyous shrieks filling the air. A profound sense of contentment, hard-earned and deeply cherished, settled over me. There would always be shadows, always new threats, always battles to be fought. But now, I knew I was ready. I was not just a survivor, I was a protector. And I was no longer afraid. My gaze drifted to the distant horizon, where the setting sun painted the clouds in hues of fiery red and deep purple. A beautiful sunset. And the promise of a new, if not entirely peaceful, tomorrow. A quiet life? Perhaps. I thought, a faint, knowing smile gracing my lips. But now I know that behind that quietude, there always lies something more. Something fierce. And I am ready for it.